be in the form of workshop. The theme of the session is FinTech for the Underserved, the truth from the customers. Out here in the panel, we have Ong Kong Chung, NAV Relations Associate, GP Unfazed Ventures. We have Ms. Sohini Rajola, Head of Network, APAC and Middle East, Western Union. We have Mr. Sanjeev Kumar, Chief Executive Officer, Spice Money. We have Mr. Sanjeev Agarwal, Director, Dwara Smart Gold. We have Mr. Terence NG, Head of Core Marketing, Nium. We have Mr. Scott Krivokopich, Managing Partner, 1982 Ventures. Right now, we would be witnessing 4 of our participants owing to the limitation of the platform. So we'll be starting with Ong, Sanjeev Agarwal, Terence and Sohini first, and then we'll pull the remaining people on stage. So over to you, Ong.
Thank you so much, Vivek. And hi everyone. Good evening. My name is Kok Chong, and I am representing NUS Alumni Ventures. So we are the venture arm where we connect angels to startups within NUS itself, and NUS is for National University of Singapore, and we are proud to be part of this global fintech festival. So yeah, do join us in this next 1.5 hours where we'll really talk about the underserved market that the fintech is actually addressing. And I think today we have an exciting panel ahead where everyone is coming from startups, big or small. Even we have a VC with us, and also what we call O player, which is Western Union itself. And yeah, so with me on stage currently I have Sanjeev Agawa, Terence, and Sohini. And before I pass it to them, I'm just going to give everyone like a brief run through how this entire panel will work. So the first half an hour, what we really will talk about is let everyone talk about the fintech trends, their products itself, what market are they addressing. And then after that, the next half an hour, we would like to bring and do this a reverse conversation where we're actually bringing customers on board, where we want to hear from the underserved market themselves, where, you know, are their needs met? Are they also facing any kind of further difficulties that fintechs could actually possibly address? And lastly, we'll come together and have a closing statement and see how we can actually better understand this fintech space. So yeah, with that, let me introduce the speakers one by one with this question. So every speaker, starting from Sohini, do tell us about yourself, your role, and at the same time tell us about who you're serving and, you know, who is the main bulk of the entire customer segment that you are actually serving. So Sohini, take it away.
Right. Thank you, Kok Chung, and very, very happy to join in this conversation where we are talking about how do we get fintech to work for the underserved. So let me start first with the Western Union. You said you have an old player here. I think I'll just add a little bit of spin to that. Yes, we are a 170-year young company, which has been actually using technology to be able to provide solutions for everyone, whether it is a businessman in Australia trying to pay his supplier in Angola, or an NGO in UK trying to send funds to any war-stricken or strife-torn country, or it is just a worker who is there in Saudi and wants to send money back home to Philippines, and across channels, across without any limitations of what's the kind of access that on both sides of that transaction people can provide. So whether I would say from providing the first telegraphic transfer years ago to today having cloud-based applications to open up a platform for partners, whether it is telcos or banks or the fintechs like Google Pay, everybody can use today or can plug into the Western Union APIs. But a little bit about myself. I manage the APAC and Middle East business, which is a very vast region, very complex, and very interesting in the kind of customers that we serve. And just in terms of access, I would say we are today serving 150 million customers in 200 countries and territories, with the ability to settle in 130 currencies, with more than 100 in real time for when you're sending to accounts, more than 4 billion access to accounts, and in 200 countries and territories, the ability to move money both at scale and in a fully compliant manner for customers across any channel, regardless of which is breaking down boundaries of access or technology. So I just pass that back to you, Chung, with that introduction
Wow.
about Western Union.
Well, thanks so much. I think through your eyes, we also learn a bit more about Western Union. And yeah, of course, it's a 170 young company. And
Yes.
yeah, I think next up, let's have Sanjeev. We will get Sanjeev to talk about Spice Money and also his um opinion and also his perspective of India in that market as well. Yeah, go ahead, Sanjeev.
So, this is Sanjeev Agarwal from Dwara Smart Goal, young founder of a young company startup. And we have, in our 1.5 years of existence, or roughly about close to 1.5, 2 years of existence, half of the time has been spent with COVID lockdown, and yet we have survived and grown. Primarily because of the fact that our mission and our objective is promoting micro savings. And micro savings happens to be a massive gap in the marketplace amongst the underserved. If you look at the Indian ecosystem of fintech startups, financial technology, banks, finance companies, NBFCs, the lending part of underserved engagement has been growing by 35 to 40% CAGR over the 3-4 years. But the saving part of the engagement as part of the underserved has remained underserved, and that's where we're trying to fill in the gap. What is very surprising that if you look at the households of the lower income households in India, even when they have borrowed money from 2 or 3 different vendors or financial institutions, they save separately, and that's been an eye opener. Our mission is to promote micro savings through a familiar asset class, which happens to be gold. And the comfort that people have in India subcontinent, in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, to use a gold as a saving platform is very, very surprising. My background is I started my career with Levers and Cadbury's, then moved to set up the private and retail banking business for Deutsche Bank, had a long banking stint, and then moved to the World Gold Council to promote gold related products and services. And that's what is an eye opener, where typically an economist or bureaucrats talk about gold as a dead asset. But surprisingly, it has a very, very strong role, not just in financial inclusion, but even in women empowerment. And I can talk about that more later as we go along. Thanks.
Sure, sure. Thanks so much, Sanjeev Agawa. And yeah, it's great to hear about how, even gold as an asset class can become a savings kind of tool. And I think that's very interesting, and we'll look forward to exploring that later. And last but not least, let me bring forward Terence. And Terence, bring away.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. I'm Terence, currently the head of marketing at Instagram. So Instagram is the digital cross-border payment business unit of a company called Nium, which is a global payments company. So to give a little more background about Instagram, Instagram is a digital payments platform that currently offers new financial services to consumers and SMEs. We are pretty much a 6-year-old company, still kind of learning and growing along the way. We empower customers with the ability to send, receive, and spend through our products like digital money transfer services, as well as the newly launched product, which we call Amaze. So currently, we do offer, service 130 million end customers. And in terms of the type of value propositions that we provide, what we do offer to our services to customers here is solving the problems of the need for transparency when it comes down to money transfers, as well as speed as well. So one example to give in terms of speed here is that 60% of our payments is made in 15 minutes. And in terms of access to corridors, we do payouts in 60 over currencies, and over 7 currencies funds. So a little bit about myself. I've been in the fintech industry for over a decade, where I got a chance to witness how technology has helped democratize money, and in particular to financial inclusion. I do believe that fundamentally there's a lot more that can be done, right? So just to kind of give a bit more context, when it comes down to in terms of making payment or facilitating payments of the unbanked. One of the key areas of our business here is that we do have customers that belong to the blue, the migrant workers that belong to blue collars, and essentially what we offer here are things like cash pickups and all. And growingly, we do kind of look into customer pain points, tap on these opportunities for us to solve for these problems. And fundamentally, we pride ourselves as being customer centric and solving these problems, and all these efforts for us to progress into improving financial inclusion. So it's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversations to come.
Nice.
Kokchung,
Yes.
shall I pin Sanjeev, Kumar, and Scott onto the
Yes,
platform?
please. Yes,
And
please.
who should I take off for now? Who should I remove? Who do you advise?
I think we can let Terence stay, and then after that we can get we can swap it for Sohini and Sanjeev Agarwal.
All right.
Thanks so much, and sorry to all the audience for this manual process. We have 5 people in the panel itself, including myself. That's 6, and yeah, due to technology limitations, that's what we can have currently. Yeah. All right. So of course, to take up more time, Sanjeev, Kumar, I can see that you're unmuted already. So you're next. Thanks.
Hi, thank you so much. Great to be here and great to be part of this conversation. Looking forward. I am the CEO of Spice Money. Spice Money is a rural fintech. What do we do? Let me explain that in about 60 seconds. Is out of the 1.35 billion population of India, the 1 billion lives in rural India. And from a very basic infrastructure, very infrastructure issue, which is lack of access to basic banking, basic financial services is what we provide. We have a network of about over 750,000 entrepreneurs spread across rural India and serving 18,000 pin codes. And we do about 1.5 billion throughput on a month, serving about 22 million consumers on a monthly basis. So we're basically serving what drives me today at Spice Money is this whole passion about changing and serving rural India. That's what we're doing. Looking forward for more conversations. Thank you.
Thanks, Sanjay Kumar. And last but not least, I think we have Scott. Scott represents a VC, which invests in a lot early stage fintechs. And of course, I shall not take more limelight away from Scott. Go ahead, Scott. Oh, Scott, we can't hear you though. No, we can't. Okay. I think Scott, you want to try again? Okay. While Scott fixes his technical issue, shall we let the rest go on first? Yeah. All right. So Scott, I think you take around 2 minutes to just like resolve that technical issues while I get Terence and Sanjeev to talk about them first.
Kokchung, you let me know who you want me to bring on and take off. I'm here, all right?
Wait, can I have Sohini back up? Thanks.
Okay, in place of who?
In place of Scott for now. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Scott. Yeah, we'll get you back later. So the next segment, I think we really want to talk about product market fit. And we want to talk about, we have just now talked a lot about which market that we're serving, how are they underserved, and roughly about the potential of it. So now we really want to delve deeper into like the entire like potential of the market itself and how are things moving and changing in the space so that we can actually address them better. So I think first of all, we really want to hear from Sohini. What exactly motivates Western Union yourself in this space, and how are things changing, and how is Western Union also adapting towards the space itself?
Thank you, Kokchung. I'll go back to the topic that we have here, right? We're talking about how do we use technology to underserved, and it's really important that while we all spoke about all of us trying to use technology, trying to reach and provide access, I think it's important to take the hype away from digital and technology. Those are just means to an end. They're not the end in itself. And sometimes we get ahead of ourselves with the technology. Because if you look at the world, and I know I'm looking forward to the section where we will really be having people from some of the segments who will come and talk about their own experience. But there are about 3.7 billion people who don't have access to internet. There are about 1.7 billion people all over the world who do not have access to banking, whether by choice or by circumstance. And what's even more interesting is, even if you take this away, firstly, we should not, because you should never be able to build a solution which is not inclusive. You cannot have a solution which does not include this massive half the population of the globe, right? The other part is also that even when you have access, like I'm sure my fellow co-panelists here will be able to give you lots of statistics about how access to banking in India has improved over the years with a lot of efforts from a lot of players. But access by itself does not mean empowerment. Access does not mean that you have the same kind of leverage. So today, somebody who has a bank account in a rural location in India, yes, technically has a bank account, but does that really enable and provide the same empowerment to that individual that somebody who's sitting, say, in Mumbai has, in terms of lending, investments, advice, any emergency?
Mm.
And we all know the answer to that, right? So when we think about products, the biggest thing that we think about is innovation which is inclusive and customer centric. So yes, you can have an app which can solve everything today. We all live in an era. In fact, when I speak to my children, they seem to believe the answer to every problem is an app. There's got to be an app that solves every problem, right? But yes, you can have an app. So Western Union has apps and digital products in 75 countries. But the beauty is when somebody is using an app, so there can be this hotshot software engineer working in the Silicon Valley, Indian. He has his grandmother back in a rural town, or maybe not even rural town, maybe in Hyderabad, in one of the places which produces, one of the states which produces the maximum number of the technology graduates. He can be, on a weekend on his app while after work, a drink with friends, maybe, just send money from his bank account directly to his mother or his grandmother. But the beauty of digital is only when the mother or the grandmother can get it in the form and factor that they want to. If they want to walk to a neighborhood post office, if they want to be able to go to a location, a retail store that they are comfortable with visiting, and really get their money within minutes. So you send it here, get on a WhatsApp call, tell your mom, hey, I've sent it. She wants to get it in cash at a location. We have to be able to enable that. And I think that's the beauty of the way we do things at Western Union. It's an omni-channel, digital plus retail, marrying getting the magic is at the intersection of both, so that people get the choice that they want when they want it. And it is not, you're not excluding any segment because of any access issues.
I think you brought up a very good point about rural fintechs and whatnot. And of course, Sanjeev Kumar here will be one of the best person to actually also talk further about rural fintechs. So in this space about rural fintechs, are we also looking at like what you said, you want to have that hard tangible cash that you're touching, right? So on top of that, are there also other things that people kind of in rural fintech wants that we probably didn't know about?
You want
Sanjeev
Sanjeev
Kumar,
to
yeah.
you want Sanjeev to answer that?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Sanjeev.
So no, I think I can relate to what Sohini is saying. And in this space, let's talk about rural India for a minute to understand this customer segment.
Yes.
And we're talking of basic access, right? The lack of basic access to banking, even for somebody to go and withdraw cash for daily consumption, is a challenge, right? If you look at the number of ATMs in India today, there's about 20 ATMs per 100,000 population. And in rural India, it is about 1 ATM in 10 villages. And even those ATMs might not be full of cash, right? So basic access is not available. What we are doing is using technology, and through entrepreneurs in rural India, who have a community, right? You're able to solve through technology this use case of a consumer coming to this entrepreneur using Aadhaar as a very, very important tool to withdraw cash and go away at his doorstep, right? Now, this accessibility through technology that we've been able to give today, and we're doing this across 18,500 pin codes, serving 22 million consumers on a monthly basis, right? This is, I think, a big change we're able to bring in the lives of a rural Indian consumer. Now, if you extrapolate that, once you're able to solve a use case like this, there are many other use cases which ride on this, right? Which means even, let's say, simple payments, the utility payments, right? Paying a bill. happens on my platform because there's accessibility. So I'm just trying to tell you, you can layer so many use cases one over the other because you've been able to bring technology at their doorstep is what we're doing. Chung.
Nice. Great. Yeah, I that brings out a very, very good point in terms of like rural fintech. And yeah, when it comes to about putting that online to offline kind of layer that we can try to surpass using technology, that's something that I think a lot of fintechs is trying to cover as well. Of course, talking about online to offline, we have to bring ourselves a bit wider in terms of scopes, and we can talk about cross border as well. So that's where probably Instagram can jump in, and Terence, bring it away.
Yeah, very related to the points that have been mentioned. And what we actually do see, I mean, first of all, in terms of what we've been looking at as a solution to our end customers, it's really around providing access to funds. And we believe that in terms of remittance, to me, it's something that's really emotional. You're pretty much parting with a lot of money each time, right? So naturally, be thinking a lot about price, a lot about speed, as well as transparency, so to speak. So which is pretty much the ethos of what we typically do. So in the case of serving for, in particular, the rural Indians, on the flip side, we do see a lot of Indian diasporas living overseas, abroad. These are typically students of parents who are living in India, or perhaps someone who's actually working abroad. And there is definitely a need to send money back home and to help to make payments for loans whatsoever, of which we do see a sizable number of them sending on a regular basis each month to service that need itself. So, for example, once every month, we do see that that there is some. Most part of the reasons for people to transfer money is typically through family maintenance or sending to self for the purpose of family sustenance, and in terms of other needs as well as servicing any form of education needs that's coming through our lens as well. So in terms of the beneficiary side of things, like serving through the anyone that may be living in rural, I think the access to cash pickup is also equally as important. Right. So in terms of thinking through the access and journey in place, it is also what the role of digital payment provider will look into solving for as well. And I think that fundamentally, as we think about anything that's online, it's around the role of what technology can do to help us solve a problem in pretty much removing a frustration. So I'm just going to relate to an example of how Instagram kind of came about, wherein the founder Prajit, when he wanted to make a trip to Thailand, for example, the payment that he had to make to the hotel was through a bank transfer. So at the point in time, payment through Swift, and then this 6 years ago, was really painful, really expensive. And look at where we are today. We pretty much kind of remove the frustration. And it's not unique to what we do. I think it's fundamentally what technology has helped us to move away from. And I think that is just one way that is helping us solve a problem for this.
Great, thanks, Terence. Uday, can I have Sanjeev, Agarwal, and Scott on stage? And yeah, we can I keep Sanjeev Kumar as well on stage? So
All right.
yeah,
All right.
thanks Terence for addressing that point. I think it's very interesting how it started off from a very personal pain point, eventually evolved into a very good technology, and I think he brought up a very good point about how fintech solutions is all about addressing frustrations and how it can really take away frustrations from the customers themselves. And yeah, I think as we now move from talking about online to offline cash to digital payments, of course, now let's bring on Sanjeev to actually talk a bit about like how gold becomes an asset class, and then after that we'll move on to Scott. Sanjeev Agarwal, go ahead. You're on mute, sorry.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Thanks, all. I did initially briefly mention about how there's a need to offer a savings platform as part of the financial inclusion platform and the underserved range of products and services which are relevant to them. And just like how Sohini and Sanjeev mentioned that in the semi-urban rural area, although the spread of bank branches, spread of accounts have grown manyfold over the last 3-4 years because of the government's of India's effort under the Jan Dhan Yojana, the challenges remain about the dormancy of this account or lack of active engagement in the accounts. Again, a lot of research says that to be able to develop and encourage people to save or develop a product which is appropriate, it has to be within the life cycle of that customer, and that's where gold fits in. And why I'm saying this, it fits in, and the opportunity there is to tap into this market, make it transparent, make it simple, make it convenient, is the fact that if you look at household data in India, around 11% of the household wealth in India is in gold and jewelry. The number one item of wealth is property at 77%. Number two is gold and jewelry. And all the financial products together, your bank deposits, your current accounts, your post office deposits, your equity, bonds, all that add up to half that of gold at 6%. So that's the size of the market where there is an opportunity to leverage that to offer greater value, greater transparency, and also be able to let it not remain as a dormant savings. So what we're doing is, as part of the savings plan, whenever the customer wants an urgent credit, that's made available to him or her at the press of the button. Any other services that they want for payment, etc., that is being linked to the gold savings plan. So it's not really, as the economists call, dead asset. It is how to add a lot of virtues to the saving process. Second point, again, repeating in a way, is there's a huge market to tap into to encourage these lower income households to save. And the only product available, if you do any sort of survey, the number one item is chit funds, where within the Indian context, there are a lot of regulatory challenges and fly-by-night operators. And hence, an appropriate saving product linked to their lifestyle, their acceptance, is a very big opportunity. The one challenge that is faced as part of this reach out to the underserved is, how do you communicate that product concept? How do you communicate the product value? And the way we're going about doing it is, we've adapted a phygital model where at the front end, we engage with partners, such as potential partner could be Spice Money, it could be Western Union. We have a few banks we're talking to. We have a few microfinance companies. Now, these partners have feet on street, which are lending money, and they're also offering a service of a savings product to these partners. And that's how we built a relationship with these customers who are not very easy to reach out through a pure digital channel.
Wow, that's a very interesting approach. Thanks so much, Sanjeev Agarwal. And yeah, I think it's very interesting how you talk about gold as an asset class, and that being one of the most common one, and another one is being property itself, right? So I was just reading last night about 182 Ventures portfolio. I saw Homebase, I think, one of the startups, I think, if I'm not wrong, in Vietnam, and it's quite an interesting startup in terms of like how it can technically also be an asset class to actually helps with people in terms of like their cash flows and so on. And yeah, I think this is where I bring Scott on the stage. And yeah, Scott, you want to introduce yourself and also probably also kind of drop some insights about how do you see like fintech trends nowadays within Southeast Asia and so on.
Sure, and I hope everyone
Thanks.
can hear me now. I apologize for the snafu earlier. Yeah, absolutely. I think and I guess I have to completely agree with what everyone said this far. The amount of need in and I guess what we can just call it underserved. There's underserved segments nearly in every category. The way people need to move money, the way people need to save money, the way people want to invest money and borrow money. All of these things are really difficult in this region, and there's still a very strong view of there's kind of have and have nots. And I think just in the same way that everything we've done, I mean, if you just imagine, and I'm not sure how old our audience is, but close your eyes, and the way you did work 20 years ago was very different than the way you do it today. The same for your financial life. So we've invested, as you mentioned, into property. I think across the globe, for the most part, property makes up the biggest financial asset of a person's life, or I guess financial livelihood. So we help. We've invested in startups that help people finance property and build property ownership. We invest in categories where it helps people invest in smaller sums. I think one of the overarching things here is that technology allows you to make something cheaper, but also better. And it's sort of one of these analogies of if you had two people do something, if you know how to do it well and you're using tools to do it, you can actually do it cheaper than to try to do it, completely with your bare hands without any knowledge. And so there's a real leverage effect of technology that actually allows people to save better. It allows people to offer better savings products to their customers. So there's without repeating what everyone has said on this panel, because it's completely dead on. Instead of thinking about technology as a disruptor, it's really an enabler. And it makes things cheaper for folks. It makes, whenever in finance, whenever you make something cheaper, you then open up a new customer base, because customers who maybe weren't able to save in small amounts in gold, for instance, with new products, they can save in smaller increments with taking less fees, whether it's being able to move money, more frequently with less cost, more transparency, with more trust. All these things are extremely crucial, and they go from the smallest transfer of, hey, how do I move money back to my auntie or friend next village over, to how does an SME move money, across a border, seemingly a few thousand miles away. So I think all of these examples that you're hearing from of these startups and some of these startups, like Nium, we take them for granted that they're startups, but they weren't businesses a few years ago, and they've done a lot, and that growth is really on the back of serving customers and serving real customers' needs. And so at 1982 Ventures, we invest in seed-stage fintech companies. We think there's a lot more problems to be solved. We think there's a lot of startups out there ready to solve them, and that's going to make a bigger pie for everybody.
Thanks so much, Scott. And yeah, I think a lot, like what you said, a lot of the panelists, have actually hit right dead on, right, in terms of like where the problems that they're trying to solve, and they have also targeted the best target segment of the audience and wherever possible, and a lot of the fintech solutions have been hitting right on point. And I think as much as we are also talking about whether these fintech solutions are hitting right on point, we want to hear from the customers themselves. And I think with us here today we have 3 invited guests, and let me just introduce them one by one first. So first of all, I think let's have the silver economy representative. So I think with us we have Rich Ho, who is currently working in Singapore Airlines engineering side, and at the same time, we would like to bring him out on stage. Uday, do you mind helping us with this?
Sure, please tell me.
Yeah, can we invite Sun Huat Ho on stage?
They have to raise their hand.
Oh, they have already raised their hand. Great. So while we wait for him to come on board to the stage, we have some questions for him. So we want to hear from him. Hi, Sun Huat, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Hi. Good evening to you, and welcome to the panel itself.
Yes.
With us on the stage, we have also many other panelists who have fintech solutions of many different sorts, and just want to kickstart some questions with you. We want to hear about amongst let's say, for example, within the silver economy itself, are there any resistance towards like online digital technology, as just now what we said about technology going a bit more online, although yes, we want to retain the hard cash itself and many other payments that are familiar to the customers themselves. Is the silver economy adapting well towards these new fintech trends?
I think adapting well. So I follow all the trends, everything. So for this transaction, for me, I think it's more easier, more convenient. So when I doing the online buy stock or wherever, earlier, I had to go to issue a check, then send to a check to the stockbroker, Even I sell any stock or anything, I have to wait for 7 days. Then I receive the check to me. Now I straight away within 3 days I can receive the cash. I receive back into my account everything. So I found it's very convenient and very fast.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How about your peers? Do you see the same for a lot of your peers? Probably. What about them? What if they're not as digital literate? You know.
Oh, for them it's quite difficult also for that. Yeah, those without following the trend and everything, they found that it's hard to use it. They don't not too trust on the what you call that internet banking and everything. They're afraid of there's some loophole or whatever. But earlier stage, I found that there's a loophole. The internet banking is not very safe. Currently, these 3 years, the banking, the security they patch out is very secure. Any hacker or anything, they straight away front line they will know. So I very trust on the internet banking.
I see. So, is credibility still an issue now, in your own opinion?
No matter how there's a hacker, find a way to hack it. But so far, our firewall is quite safe. Especially in the Singapore side, the government really encourage all the banking, everything to be a very strong firewall.
Okay,
so,
interesting.
Yeah, in Singapore, we will trust our banking.
I see. I just want to have one last question from you. So, like, on top of that, have you heard about any, like, financial concerns within the silver economy that people of fintech solutions have not addressed yet? Are there also like other kind of pain points that you can see around you that probably we don't see as much for people outside of the silver economy?
It means some of them still got the problem with the doing the internet banking and everything. For me, I think we have to catch up. Even now, our government is encouraging all of them to move forward to internet. There are a lot of school conduct everything. So there's a silver. They call that the silver schooling for all the internet banking.
Oh,
everything. Yeah. So everyone should pick on it also.
I see. Yeah. Thanks so much, Sunhua. Just stay on for a while, and let's just bring back the questions to the panel itself. So regarding the penalties, anyone would like to address any of the points? I think I heard a little bit about digital literacy. I think digital literacy on that end, I think of course there are probably some public efforts to actually help the customers on their end. But how about on the products end? Are there any also efforts to actually assimilate this curve? Anyone would like to address that? I can bring you on stage.
I guess maybe it's a bit tangent point here, but I think what's interesting about fintech and this newest wave, and we're still at the very beginning of fintech. So I just want to be clear, fintech has done a lot for developing markets. It's completely changed developed markets as well. So it's not like something we're going to do for another year or two and it's going to be all finished and dusted. There's a long way for this thing to go. But one of the biggest things that's happened is that new fintechs have come from an approach of what do customers want and how do we create products for customers? And these can be all types of customers, but the old model was very much that banks created products for themselves. And they kind of force customers into them. And you can look at that across the range of things. It can be anything from forcing customers into variable rate mortgages, which a customer can't actually hedge their mortgage. A bank could. So it's something as simple as that, to long application processes, to things that they need to how they KYC and all this kind of stuff. It's very from start to finish. And it's even from, I would say, putting the onus on it. Banks typically force any error they made back onto customers. And we've even seen that this year. One of the big banks in Singapore, and Singapore has got one of the best records of digital banking, actually made some errors, and it took weeks for customers to get their money back. And this is changing. Fintechs now are going much more customer-centric. They say, how do customers use my product? How should they be using my product? And when something goes wrong, we're going to do something better for them. So I think there's a big shift, and that builds a lot of trust with customers. And so that's why customers are very much quick to adapt to the way the way fintechs are doing business, and that's why you see that quick shift over.
Cool. Anyone would like to address again? We have a few minutes just to talk about it. I think there's also the idea about credibility. I think probably Sohini, I see that you have
Yeah,
unmuted yourself.
happy
Yes,
happy
can we
to.
have Sohini on stage? Yeah, go ahead and start. Yeah.
Can
Who
I
shall I
start?
remove, Kok Chang?
Can I have Scott out of the stage? Thank you. Great. Great.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sohini.
Yeah, thank you, Kokchung. Yeah, I think there is this whole what I heard was there's a little bit of hesitance or just discomfort with the platform, and I think it's important to not just talk about what the platform does, like a digital platform. What is the particular service? It could be a payment, it could be a remittance, it could be applying for a loan, getting a bank account, whatever is service that is provided. There's also the element of what do you do after that? How do you, when things go wrong, if the person gets stuck somewhere, are you able to provide two things? One is a peace of mind that if something has gone wrong, their money is not going to be lost. That's the biggest thing that people worry about, right? Like if I try something on this complex platform, when I'm standing in front of someone, I know what I need to do. So there is this whole trust which needs to be there. And the second part is, how do you resolve issues? So when you provide customer service, like I'm happy to share that at Western Union, we provide customer service in more than 38 languages all over the world. So it's very important that if the customer is trying to then get in touch with you, if you only have, I can have an AI powered chatbot, and I love AI powered chatbots, not that I'm not in favor of them, but if there is someone who really wants to speak to somebody in their own language and have it resolved, it's important that we provide for that. That's the other thing I think I would like to add here to be able to address the concerns that were raised.
Great. Thanks, Sohini, and also thanks to Rich Ho, and thanks for participating in this panel. Yeah, do stay here, and I would like to invite Wesley on stage as well. So Wesley is actually a student currently in NUS as well, and he has actually just finished his national service in Singapore, which is like a 2-year mandatory kind of like army service that every citizen has to go through, every male citizen has to go through. And yeah, Wesley, welcome to the stage. And we have been on of course the panel has been talking a lot about fintech solutions. I think now we'd just like to ask you a few questions the same way about how we have asked the rest. And yeah, I think for Wesley, I think one of the few things that we really want to talk about is because now that you're a student, and at the same time, I think you also told us that you run an e-commerce business on the side, right? We'd just like to hear about, what are some problems that you face actually while you're managing your finances, be it, on the credit side, in terms of like inflow and outflows of cash flow management. Any problems that you have been facing?
Yeah, thanks, Kok Chong. Yeah, so for me, even as an e-commerce owner and also as a student, I find that for Singapore, the system as a whole, they don't have it's not credit based. So, for example, as a student myself, I don't have access to any credit. For example, if I want to get a credit card, the maximum credit I can get is actually $500, which is really weird when they trust 18-year-olds to hold a gun and also to take a 50K education loan. So I don't know why they can't give us more credit line than $500 per month. So that's why I feel that there's something can be changed in terms of that. Because for me, I do understand the time value of money, and the point where I want to have more cash on my hands. So that's why I want to buy things more installment. That's why I really like to use, for example, like buy now, pay later solutions, although they're not readily available for a lot of stuff. So because I think having more cash on me is better, even as I run my business. And even for those buy now, pay laters, there's a lot of limitations. For example, if I want to buy an iPhone off the shelf or something like that, a lot of times they don't offer this time by installment plan, or maybe like a 12-month or 24-month installment plan. Yeah.
Great, thanks so much. I think you brought up two very important issues I've caught, which is first of all, I think about credit line. I think that also leads quite a lot to the buy now pay later solutions. Probably both Sanjeev, any comments about how is the scene relatively the same in India itself? Are there any things that you guys would like to bring out in terms with regards to that?
So yeah,
Sanjeev? Kumar?
yeah. So I think I personally believe fintechs have a very, very good opportunity on the credit side, and there are multiple reasons for this. Is the whole opportunity to to provide credit to customer segments who probably would not get the same through official the standalone financial institutions, and that's an opportunity. I think there's an opportunity of innovation here. One, there's a huge opportunity of innovating even the entire collection cycle, which is very traditional today from the lenders today. That's an opportunity. However, I must also admit that the space that we are in, which is the rural India, right? The problem gets compounded over there for the lack of necessary documentation or records on basis of which you provide that credit, right? So what we do is, we use transaction basis. So like Wesley said, if there is somebody who's working with you and you know his transaction pattern, there is a way you could provide credit writing on that and have a collection mechanism on that. So I think those are ways where I think fintechs have a very big opportunity, and that's something that we should see a lot of work happening as we progress.
So, if I may, Ong?
Yeah, go ahead, of course.
So, the BPL, or buy now, pay later, is a very, very strong, very, very lucrative proposition, and is growing by leaps and bounds in India itself amongst many fintechs who started offering the services. But if you look at it, it is nothing new. If you look at within urban India or semi-urban or rural, the local kirana shop or the provision store has been offering that services for generations. The challenge that a fintech company faces vis-a-vis the local credit provider is the ability to assess the credit worthiness of this borrower, which a local kirana shop or any other product and service provider can easily access because he's within that community. And the way it is being worked out is, how do we have groups of support system which can handle this? The opportunity is there, the market is already there. The ability to get the benefit of a product by only paying 10 or 20% is a huge value add especially for the underserved, because their income is generated over time. Their purchasing power is not upfront. It is, if you're able to crack the credit assessment of this category holistically at a local level, it's a great opportunity. Within the product range that we have in the savings platform, we're also looking at how we can add value in a similar manner. There are some propositions that we are working on, because it's a great opportunity, especially for bigger ticket item purchases.
So now flipping over the question, Wesley, on your end, how hearing about the new ways of looking at creditworthiness, how do you feel, as someone who is in this space and using such fintech solutions, are these will they actually help solve your credit issues? Are they also adding new troubles to you, because now that you probably even have to show your transaction patterns and things like that? Do you think it's something that's viable for you?
Yeah, but I definitely think so. I think never really heard of the borrowing on transactions, because, for example, like Singapore, since everything's already digitized, I feel like implementing something like that would be pretty easy. And since all the data is collected, I feel like that can be a pretty good solution, especially as students. I feel like the credit limit of $500 a month is pretty limiting, and like having that option will actually open a lot of doors for other people in terms of, for example, like you said, if they want to buy higher ticket items and stuff like that, it also increases their purchasing power, all this, which is better for the economy as a whole. But of course, just making sure that everyone's responsible. Don't end up like a situation in America where there's a lot of credit and debt issues. Yep.
Cool. Terence and or Scott, would you guys like to add any other things to this?
Yeah, actually, if I may.
Can we have Sohini and Sanjeev Kumar to leave the stage and bring Terence and Scott on stage? Yeah, thanks so much.
Cool, thanks a lot. So,
great. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually do relate a lot to what Wesley has mentioned. And actually, over 10 years ago, I faced the same situation, $500 limit, very limiting. Didn't realize that things haven't changed yet. So, and progressively, as we look into the economy, entrepreneurs are getting younger and younger. Like, just one example, a YouTube creator could kind of earn lots of money. Like the top earner on YouTube today is a 9-year-old kid, for example. Right, so in those kind of situations, there must be some needs in of any form of credit line, or should he eventually want to venture into certain areas. So I think in particular to Wesley's point, I do believe that there's potentially some role to play where companies like startups or even enterprises could influence government in terms of the needs, recognizing the fact that this is a segment that is growing and is relatively underserved. Right, it is going to be a long drawn process, but as with most established companies like Nium, for example, we are focusing more around on policy, influencing government, as well as feeding in information around ways or better ways to kind of serve the market. So I think that's one. The other piece on buy now pay later is I thought it's a really smart way to sort of circumvent that issue. But I guess to others, probably Wesley is great at organization of personal finances. It may point to the risk where certain individuals may end up falling into the risk of debt or issues with like late payment fees and whatsoever. So it is potentially an area, while it is a good problem to solve, it is one area that kind of remains to be an awareness thing that needs to be improved over time as well. Right? So I think two things on that piece to kind of like.
I see. Yeah. I think we have one last question for Wesley. And I think it's really also about in terms of like banking applications, I think this goes beyond like the buy now pay later. We are looking at like probably even your digital banking solutions or even any other kind of things where, let's say for example, in terms of your student loans considerations and even your future career considerations. Are there any criteria as a young student / also like a small business owner is actually looking at when you actually look for banking solutions? Are there any criteria in mind in terms of usage as well?
Yep, I think in Singapore in general, there's not a lot of options in terms of normal banking. But for example, since I run my own business, I do have an Aspire banking account. And for me, I would feel that something that can resemble that in a sense where, for example, there's always like live real-time chat, live chat all the time. Like I think it's like on weekdays 9 to 5, or is it I think the whole day. And like for example, DBS, if you ever try to call their support, you have to go through a whole SOP, a flow of like trying to find someone to talk to, which takes like quite a long time. So it's kind of refreshing to see, for example, like a digital bank like Aspire that offers is kind of online versus, for example, the traditional banks where they don't really offer much support. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, thanks so much, Wesley. Does anyone in the panel would like to address what he just said with regards to probably customer service in terms of banking?
Yeah, I think he's spot on. That a lot of these legacy players they really think that they've win on customer service because they have somebody at a window, but in fact they have less and less branches, and many people don't want to go to a window. That it takes a lot of time to go to a window. It maybe takes 20-30 minutes by bus or whatever it is. If you live in a rural area, it takes even longer. It could take half a day. So I think again, kind of that point of creating products that really serve your customer and you're really close to your customer. I think Sanjeev mentioned that the reason that shop owners can offer credit traditionally is because they're close to their customer. They understand their customer. And that's really where fintechs win always, is understanding the behavior of the customer and being able to craft a product that's really tight for that. And that's what actually Buy Now Pay Later has done. That's been the biggest innovation, is been able to understand how people spend and not try to say, okay, well, if you want to borrow money, now you got to go for a 9-month loan or a 12-month loan, and then you're going to have to step away and go do something else. It's really to be able to use technology to say, okay, what type of purchase is this? What's the risk of this? How does this person spend money? And how can we mitigate a few things very early on to get rid of fraud and these kind of things, which actually costs a lot of money in the long run. So I think there's really a lot about getting close to a customer. That's really where you win. And that's not just fintech. That's in every business across the board, but it's all about really getting close to your customer and giving a product that's really suitable. And then the last thing I would say is that there's something that's kind of looming and it gets talked about a lot. So I'm just going to say it, open banking. Traditionally, most financial institutions have sort of trapped customers within their own little product suite. And so if you're looking for a loan, if you don't bank at that bank, you try to go to a different bank, you've got no credit history there. When you talk about measuring people and evaluating them based on what their transactions are, if those transactions are open, now all of a sudden you're sort of doing a bit of an auction, or you're letting banks bid for your business rather than, or financial institutions bid for your business rather than the other way around, where you say, okay, well, if I switch banks, then I have no credit history again, and that affects everybody. But at the lower part of the pyramid, it affects them even more. And you see people in markets where they're just at the level where they get a bank account, but maybe that bank account is because they have an employer. When they switch employers, they have to switch bank accounts because that's the new bank account that they get paid into. They lose all their credit history. They're starting from scratch again. And so I think India has been pretty progressive in the way they've approached this. And other markets are also pushing into this. So there's a lot of things that are, I think, opening up again globally. We're seeing this change in the US. We're seeing it change in Europe. And especially it's really impactful in developing markets and Asia.
So yeah, thanks so much, Scott. We can't have our last person who's representing the gig economy to join us. But I think I found a relevant question in the Q&A section about this. So I think I'm just going to read it out. So do you see alternative metrics for KYC, know your customer, such as e-commerce transactions or gig economy job engagement rates, as they are being more prominent in terms of fintech offering credit? I think this a lot got to do with like the gig economy itself. And I think from what we have spoke previously with one of the gig economy workers, is also about how, let's say, for example, you're doing many different gigs and you're engaging with different companies. What happens is that everyone's using a different service. It's very hard for you to actually manage your finances all in one place. So yeah, I think this is a huge problem in terms of not just KYC, but also in terms of like personal finance management. So yeah, anyone in the panel would like to take this? So
I would say on the KYC issue, and I'll let someone else speak first. I think the way that a lot of fintechs are taking approach is a bit different, where we can, just the same way we apply risk-based metrics to other things, we can also apply some risk-based metrics to KYC. And this is kind of a new concept for the old days, where we said, okay, if you're going to open a bank account, you need to have all these things. A lot of folks don't have all those things, whether it's a small business or whether it's an individual. You may not have whatever those requirements are, but if it's a small account, then they should be able to accommodate these things. And I guess it comes in different guises, whether it's certain countries offering, say, an e-money license, or like small account remittances, and then you can graduate up. I think that's a huge step going forward. We're seeing it more and more from different regulators, but that's the way finance should be. And I think building that into products was also profound. And I think the biggest case study for this globally has been Stripe, where they say, look, we'll sign you on. You can do up to $1,000 of money movement, of payments. But at that point, we're going to have to ask you some additional questions. And then when you get up to the next level, we'll ask you some additional questions. And that's really the way the financial system should be. It should be much more risk-based. And I think gig economy workers face this kind of thing. Pretty much any small business owner faces this. And you get down to the rural communities. I had the pleasure of working with Grameen Bank a few years back on the ground in Bangladesh. And you get to people where they have their own little business, but, producing government documents and this and that is very difficult from them. And if that locks them out of the financial system, we're never gonna progress as society. So I think just on the KYC point, I think it's really important.
Cool. Thanks so much, Scott. Anyone else? Probably since Sanjeev Agarwal. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so talking about the KYC, and which is such a big challenge in the Indian context, and the costs associated with it. To address this situation, the Reserve Bank has come out with a concept called account aggregators, where the KYC information is stored by these account aggregators, and any financial institution can plug into it and confirm the details, and thereby avoid the whole process of getting the data individually for every provider. The concept is very strong, but the challenge is going to be, and has been in the past, where many of the financial institutions, including banks, do not adapt these things fast enough. And there is, if the banks and financial institutions and lenders and all the other platforms adapt the concept of account aggregators, plug into that account aggregator, which has a certain capital requirement, has gone through a process of vetting by the Reserve Bank before being appointed, a lot of the KYC related challenges can come down. Yeah, I'll give you a simple example. One of the top financial banks today, still there's a concept of eKYC or CKYC. Wherever you invest in a mutual fund or any other product in India, there's a concept of a CKYC where the records are centrally stored by a depository, and they give you a reference number, which the bank can counter check directly by plugging into it. But yet, a private large bank refused to accept it as per the norms because there's a gap in their understanding of the regulation. So you still have to give physical documents to them every year to update your KYC. So this is ridiculous because that is a huge amount of cost in terms of paperwork, in terms of leakage of data. What I'm saying is there are opportunities, there are platforms available. It is from the regulators and other institutions to communicate it properly, and for the institutions to adapt it and understand it.
Wow, I think that's a very new perspective. And yeah, I think you also highlight on top of that, in terms of like the operational process, I think there's a lot of problems that might happen. And these are things that are, you can say that they're unavoidable in that sense. And yeah, that sounds like a lot of risk being uptake by the banks itself, right? And that's something that is risk that customers will face. Cool. Since we're still on the topic on risk, probably do people back at the bottom of the stage would like to also like address anything with regards to risk-based metrics that we have just talked about? Sanjeev, Sohini?
Sohini, would you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yes, sorry. Can we have Sohini and Sanjeev on stage? Probably let's have Scott and Sanjeev out of the stage. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Uday. Great.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Bring it on.
Thank you, Chung. Yeah, this is, the whole KYC, and I'll put it in the context of, I know we were here speaking about, we started with credit and then we went to bank accounts, but the whole idea about how do you make KYC, the entire knowing the customer, a very seamless, easy process. I'll talk about it in the context of cross-border remittance. And when you look at cross-border remittance, you actually need to do it twice, right? You need to do the KYC of the sender as well as the receiver, and you need to find a really simple way to be able to move money within minutes, do the currency conversion, and also ensure that you are able to do the right thing for the good customer, for the deserving customer, but keep all the elements of what could go wrong when you're trying to move money across borders, right? I would say there is a lot of scope for fintechs to be able to come in, or I won't say fintech, for technology to be applied to make this simpler. Because most of this information, the issue arises because it's always, and at Western Union, I know that we have invested immensely in compliance, and we can pride ourselves on having like really, really strong and robust compliance engines, which can work across any number of 20,000 corridor combinations in 200 countries and corridors. But it's something which it's almost like we've built it for ourselves. If someone had to come and offer the same thing, they would really need to build it themselves. And the open question, and don't have an answer for that, Chung, is, and that's for the ecosystem and also for the regulators, because it's not really just about what you can go and build in your own, little island, but it's about what's going to be universally acceptable and scalable. We can build a very nice solution which works beautifully, but if it's not scalable, then it's not going to be useful again, right? So I think it's an open question in terms of risk management, the regulating bodies, whatever they are for the transaction, whether it is central banks or any other institutions that come into play, different rules apply for different countries. But how do you make it more commonly available for somebody's, identity information and authentication? There are two parts of it. There's just the information. One can have the information, but does the processor of whatever transaction you're trying to do have the capability to authenticate it? And without add the layer, which it'll get a little complex if we add that layer on top of what we're trying to address here, add the layer of the emerging privacy guidelines, It's not about, so you have to be able to authenticate for the purpose of that transaction, make it a transaction-based risk management, but really not store that information. And what happens if at a later point that entity needs to prove something about that information? So it is, I wish there was a simpler answer, but this is one that I think is going to take a lot of might of a lot of players across the globe to be able to solve and get to a more simpler solution for. Sorry, I've put more questions than I
no
trying to
worries.
answer your question.
I wanted to just also point out that I think with regards to this entire KYC point, it's very interesting how we realize that there's a lot of back end issues to it. I wouldn't say issues, but more of like processes that we need to make ourselves very clear upon in terms of like whether things are aligned, the synchronization around the world about it, and at the same time also like how can we also then like segmentize the customers and then after that properly categorize each of them into the different KYC levels. So yeah, I think that's a very huge research question, I think, that a lot of stakeholders have to sit together to really start to think about. So
absolutely,
I think that's a very fair point. Just bringing back to the underserved topic, right, that we have on hand. I think a lot of it got to do with about not just like people movement, money movement, and at the same time it's also a lot about how then can you manage it on your own, right, as a personal. So I just wanted to bring back the entire question about how like back in the gig economy where people actually do have like volatile income, and that's something that we want to just address as well, because when you have
Chung, we can't hear you.
Can
Sorry, yeah, we can hear you. No, we can hear you now, Chung. We lost you for.
Yes.
Oh, great. Break. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. What's my last sentence?
You were talking about someone in the gig economy, but we didn't hear what.
Oh,
what
yes.
is it that you're
So
trying
so
to
in the gig economy, itself, we are actually looking just to address one question that we had just now is a lot about how there are multiple wallets nowadays, and with everyone having different avenues that is most suitable for them. And as a gig economy worker, especially with upcoming of a lot of contract economy, all these solutions will not be very integrated. So that itself might be a problem in terms of personal finance for a gig economy worker. Are there any certain trends that we are looking at in terms of like helping them consolidate stuff, or even like making them on the same platform? I think from what I read last night, I think Nium has something similar. But at the same time, if anyone like to address about this particular fintech trend, that's something that we like to actually hear about.
Yeah, we just kind of go ahead first.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think to start things off with, if I just use Singapore as an example, I'll say that to start things off with the government efforts, there is this big effort to create a smart nation, and I think sometime last year, they've actually opened access to within the banks for you to aggregate, all your financial information. So I think what that really says here is, like what you pointed out here, the need is fundamentally there to increase financial literacy, as well as to kind of solve for better financial awareness in terms of how we manage that. And Instagram, what we're kind of building here, other than just facilitating money transfers as well as creating the ability to spend till recently, what we're also looking to do here is to create more awareness around the type of spends. So for example, one of the card that we launched recently is called Amaze, which allows you to link up to 5 credit or debit MasterCards. And what it does here is, as you kind of spend through the Amaze card, every transaction gets locked down. And what we intend to do with the data here is to inform, put the power back into customers to let them know that, hey, visible, this is where you kind of spend, and then create more awareness around where certain areas that perhaps you could capitalize on better deals and more cash back on certain areas here. So to the consumer, it's really boiling down to choice fundamentally. But as we think about creating more access to with pretty much like an all-in-one solution here, I think that's where it comes down to the choice of customers, and that's where players like Instagram, for example, do fall in place to solve.
Great. Thanks so much, Terence. Anyone else would like to also address about this
Well, I can.
before? Oh, yeah.
Sanjeev wants to speak, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Go ahead first. While we bring Sanjeev and probably
Mhm.
Scott also on stage. Thanks, Terence and Sanjeev Kumar.
No, I was just going to add, Kokchung, that what the trend that needs to be there for, or what will really solve for that, is two things. One, which Scott referred to, which is open banking, and I think that's a trend in the right direction. The second is going to be interoperability of wallets, and I think my co-panelists from India will be able to maybe talk about that better. But there have been efforts, and there is, and that's where regulators come in, right? Like you have technology companies or wallet companies who come up with a very good solution. They come at scale, they become big, but then there's another player who offers something similar, and then the customer is like looking at siloed offerings. So that's where the regulation needs to come in to come out with two things. One is standardization, and then have some regulations around interoperability. So that was my perspective. I think that's where the solution will lead. Handing over to
Definitely.
Sanjeev.
Yes. Uday, can I have Sanjeev Agarwal and Scott on stage? Thanks, Terence and Sanjeev Kumar. Great. I think Sanjeev Agarwal wanted to speak first. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, hearing you, Ong and Sohini, there is a startup idea which I just thought of, and would be interesting for people in the audience. And the challenge is that everybody wants a wallet. Every startup wants their wallet to be the number one wallet, and beyond the first, second, third, you have no chance. So there's a startup opportunity where it can be aggregator where multiple wallets can be on that platform, and that startup can identify which wallet is giving a better value in terms of offer, etc., and switch people to that. Number one. Number two challenge is where if you had multiple wallets, you have idle balances lying in each of these wallets. So how do you optimize your idle balances lying across this wallet? That could be an interesting startup idea for people in the group.
I like how the entire entrepreneurship spirits is being bred and also showcased on the panel itself, which is very, very good. Yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting idea. Not very sure how our gig economy workers in the audience will actually think about it. Feel free to drop some comments in the chat, and yeah, let's see whether we can address them. Yes, Scott, you look like you want to say something.
No, I think it's great. I think it's excellent. Yeah, I would just say it's you bring up the gig economy. That's just another segment that's really underserved, and it's a very big segment today, and it's growing very fast. So I think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, everyone wanted to be a wallet. Everyone wanted to make a wallet. Everyone who made a wallet, they tried to tick a box with a bunch of features. Those features were just, I don't know, they were made on a spreadsheet or something. If you talk to some people who work in the gig economy, ask what they really have problems with. I bet there's a lot of problems that they're still struggling with today. Whether it's getting money from 6 different markets, or maybe it's a lot more than that. I don't know what the problems are. I'm always really keen to hear, potential customers say, hey, what's really going on, and what do they have problems with? Because there's still, I guess the theme is we're in beginning innings here. Even I think there's some massive unicorns across Asia now, and it seems like every week now a new one popping up. But we're not done. We're not even close to being done. There's a lot of people who still need fair financial products that actually fit the way that we've just changed so much in the last 15 years, and we probably were underserved before then. So whether it's large players that continue to invest in serving customers better, or just because there's new markets opening up, FinTech is going to continue to keep growing, and I think the panelists here really speak to that.
Great. Thanks so much. So I just want to summarize a lot of things that I've learned today. I think this has been a very great session. We still have a 10 minutes Q&A. I know everyone's slightly tired. It's been a very long session. But yeah, I'd just like to say I think we addressed a lot of interesting points at the start about whether that technology on its own is not exactly a disruptor, but an enabler, in Scott's words. And at the same time, it's also a lot about making sure that our fintech solutions moving ahead is something that people are familiar with, and they can grow together with the customer itself. So being customer centric is extremely important. The next few things that we actually talk about is about in the silver economy, where are people actually getting used to digital payments, and then we brought up things like digital literacy and also credibility of the banking solutions itself. And then after that, we actually spoke about KYC itself, and also buy now pay later solutions in the market. And all these are very interesting stuff. So as I go through them, if the audience have any other questions, do drop them in the Q&A segment. And at the same time, I think the last point is really about what Scott just said about having newer and newer fintechs, unicorns jumping out, and also at the same time really addressing more and more underserved markets. I think a lot of them are still very untapped, and a lot of them are still probably hidden and not noticed. So I think there's one question I would like to bring back Sanjeev Kumar to the stage. Although I think he have already answered it, but yeah, probably can get Sanjeev Kumar to actually come back to the stage. Probably Scott, to replace Scott. Yeah, I think it's something about travel for rural markets. I think you have already addressed it, but you want to probably elaborate further on it?
So, Chung, this is actually one of the points that we were discussing about innovation and products. How do you design new products, keeping the customer in the center? And rural India is pretty much that. When you design a product, you have to understand that segment, right? And what we've done is that's what we do. We keep innovating. For example, we picked travel as a segment. Like I said, we also do. We've figured out the access of banking as a problem statement, and we're solving it using technology. Likewise, travel, the need of travel, right? There is the access of rural Indian consumer to go, and where does he book his tickets, right? Not at the doorstep. He has to travel 25 kilometers for a local travel agent, or 50 kilometers for basic travel booking is a problem statement, and that is what we've solved through using technology. So these are what I call them are these are new innovations that you do, keeping the customer at the center using technology, and that's something, Chung, we're realizing is working very well in rural India.
Great to hear that. I think honestly, for a big country like India, these kind of solutions would definitely be very useful. I can see definitely the utility in it. I would just like to have answer a few questions that I'm seeing in the Q&A segment. I think one of them is about underserved class still build their wealth via self-help groups and also through microfinance institution. So how can fintech actually disrupt this and also benefit sorry, I lost the question. This class onboard customers and educate them to bring financial stability. So I think Gajendra is actually talking a lot about how a lot of wealth is actually being built by like word of mouth. What next for yourself, I heard about this construction gig, then I'll move on to that. And I think a lot of other if I'm not wrong, that's how I interpret the question. Is there any way that fintech can actually disrupt this and also help to benefit this particular underserved class in terms of onboarding and also moving them? Yeah. Sanjeev Agarwal, go ahead.
Yeah. So when you're getting into the segment of the underserved, and when you're getting into the segment of the semi-urban and rural market, like Sanjeev Kumar said, that you have to understand their requirements, their pain points and challenges, and then address that accordingly. So one of the requirements is handholding, where because they're not so digitally enabled, digitally educated, initially they require some element of handholding. They require doorstep services. So similar to what Sanjeev said, but in a different twist. Typically, if they want to go to a bank, they have to spend half a day, or they want to go for some other service, they'll spend half a day. They'll lose half a day's wages. So can you offer the service at their doorstep, which is a bigger deal than anything else, because they've lost that half a day wage for that day. And the third element, which Sohini had addressed some time back, where fintechs believe that bots are the savior in terms of handling customer engagement and customer queries and complaints or challenges, but the question is how you're able to resolve their queries, challenges, concerns in their local language, in the dialect they understand. These become very, very important. With respect to microfinance companies and fintechs, I think just like I read one article sometime back where one of the former Reserve Bank ED mentioned that banks and fintechs don't have to sort of struggle and engage against each other, but with each other. And the same thing holds true as far as the underserved, where the microfinance institutions can engage with the fintech companies and take advantages of the ability to put products in a very simple, systematic, convenient, and appropriate manner and make that available through the microfinance partners. And that's what we've already done since the last 1.5 years very successfully. And that could be a very interesting model. Work together.
Great. Thanks so much, Sanjeev. Does anyone want to also address that? If not, I can move on to probably one of the last questions that we can talk about. Great. I think this question just came in and it's pretty interesting. So, about to serve the underserved market, does the penetration of network infrastructure, is it critical? And at the same time, what actually is the current state of such infrastructure being built? I think infrastructure comes in many forms. I think both software, hardware, and as we have 66% feature phone users in rural Bharat. So I think this is a very a question that's set in that context, and I think this is a pretty interesting question in terms of infrastructure. Whether is it out there to actually support this fintech? Does anyone want to address this?
So
Great,
let me,
Sanjeev Kumar. Yes, go ahead.
Let me talk about it because that's the space that we are in.
Yes.
And like I continue to say, the rural consumer has a lot of needs and demands. It is the accessibility which is what is lacking. And I'm using this word as infrastructure, right? The lack of infrastructure to provide those services is what is lacking. What is happening now, Chung, and this is what technology is helping, is with technology, you're able to bridge that infrastructure gap. Right? And that's what is working today with the smartphone penetration, obviously with Aadhaar, right? With also a very young rural India, which is adapting to technology far quicker than what we would anticipate. Right? A combination of all of this is actually what is helping to bridge this infrastructure divide, and that we're seeing a lot of success in that, John.
So are there any efforts moving forward, either under Spice Money or like any government efforts in terms of like building up this particular infrastructure?
So government is doing a lot. There are a lot of initiatives that the government has done and is doing. We obviously, as independent private players, are using the opportunity to leverage what the government has done, what the regulator has done. Even on many technology pieces, there are a lot of digital innovations that are happening here. We are leveraging that, and at the end, we're trying to find that find that medium in how we can leverage all of that to provide to help the rural consumer meet the need.
Great. I think that's actually the way forward for fintech. Also looking at how technologies are maturing, and then from there abide to whatever pace that these are moving on, and that's where as people are getting more accustomed to the technology, that's how we can actually move forward to actually adopt them into our own daily habits. So I think just to end with, since we have just 5 minutes left, I'd just like to ask this one last question. I think it's asked by Prachi, and also combining it with what Anand asked right at the start of the conversation. I think there's also now a lot of more readily solutions where we are already familiar with, such as Twitter. I think TransferWise was being mentioned as well. Now, so FX is actually foreign exchange transfers are actually a very commonplace item, and at the same time, this space is getting more and more disrupted. Are there any ways to actually receive remittance through apps but not paying any cost, even as it remits from an overseas bank account? Would Sohini or even Terence like to address this?
Happy to, happy to. So I think there are two questions here, Kok
Yeah.
Chung, and I would say the first part is, hey, can I receive remittance without paying anything additional? And it's a very, very valid question, because in a remittance, basically there is a sender and a receiver. So there are two ends to the transaction. At Western Union, we always ensure that once the sender, so there is full transparency in the transaction. So if I'm sending $1,000 here from Singapore to India, both the sender and the receiver will know exactly at that point that the $1,000 is going to get converted into 55,000 Indian rupees. So there is absolutely no charge that the receiver is levied. They will get it. They don't need to pay anything. Whatever is fixed, the fee or the forex conversion is fixed at send. So as a receiver, you can actually pull it. And if you just as an example, if you had like an Airtel um, um, payment bank account or a wallet, you could actually go and pull it into your bank account directly. You would not need to even go and get it in cash if the sender hasn't sent it already to direct it to your bank account. So that bit is taken away from the transactions where there is transparency. And this is something which, when Terence was mentioning, when the founder of Instagram, how he started it, because basically there was a lot of opaqueness in, I'm sending 100, is the person getting 100 or is he getting 98? And today in that web of correspondent banking, etc., nobody really knows, because how many hops are happening. So when you um, you use a provider like Western Union, you have full transparency across end to end at that point of time. Now, can it be totally free of cost? Or what happens when somebody like a Twitter, and whether it is Twitter or today Google Pay from the US, is actually using Western Union to power their transfers? Can the cost go further down? I think that's the crux of the question. um, you can't really make it absolutely free, because what is important is anyone who's providing the service needs to do it at scale, needs to do it in a very compliant manner, needs to ensure that you have the technology and you have the customer service should something not work. And there is a cost of providing that. But can you keep bringing it, if keep being more and more effective and efficient, so that that cost keeps coming lower, and it is always transparent to you, so you don't feel like you are not paying anything, but hey, you might actually be paying something because there's some back end charge. I think those are the key questions, and that's what our industry is working towards, Kok Chung. I know that I see the question now here. Twitter entered money transfer and TransferWise. Is Western Union facing disruption? I think disruption is good. Competition is good. And more than TransferWise or Twitter, we have a much greater coverage at this point of time. And I hope that competition will make us keep doing bringing our processes to be more efficient as well. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah. I see Terence unmuting himself. I suppose Terence would like to be on stage. Can I have Sanjeev Agarwal in exchange for Terence on stage? Great.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Sohini. I think you addressed pretty much everything I would say as well. But you brought up really great points, right? End of the day is boiling down to the type of value that the customer perceives. And I think that transparency plays a really big part to it. When you send money overseas, it's really important that you make sure that the money gets over to your beneficiary or your recipient. And you want to make sure that it's being done fast. You want it to be cheap as well. Now, I completely agree with the question on whether it could be $0. I know that there are certain companies that do aspire as part of a mission to get there eventually. I'll say that with the rise of FinTechs offering these services, even non-payment related ones, I think the fundamental problem statement that it's trying to solve for here is the underlying hidden fees that the traditional means are offering today. Right? I would say that pretty much what's available out there through digital means are offering great rates and fantastic offerings so far. But when it comes down to the education and awareness in terms of what the value really is, I think that's very limited, right? Because what we do see is people are swayed by pricing sometimes. They don't necessarily see the end value. So when something happens, going back to what Sohini has mentioned earlier on, anything related to customer service, what happens after that? Are you going to get your money back? How soon? Are you going to get your issues resolved? Because by the time frustrations will happen and that need that you would have at that point in time to probably pay for an education or to send money back home, that's going to be impacting the livelihood of your end recipient. So I'll say that at least from Instagram's standpoint, as we do aspire to head towards the mission of providing low cost, it is still a journey ahead, right? We have to kind of do it at scale, as Sohini has mentioned. So I'll say that fundamentally the underlying problem statement is to kind of make sure that we provide value and to provide transparency as compared to traditional incumbents today.
Great stuff. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone. And also, before we go, I would just like to share just a last kind of like survey as we wrapped up. So I'm just gonna share my screen real quick, and in the meantime, really thank all the speakers here for actually being part of this entire panel itself. And yeah, this is just a very short kind of like marketing stint for NUS Alumni Ventures, and we have a post-event survey for the audience itself, just a very quick 3 minutes to actually have the survey itself. I think one of my colleagues in the audience will actually post it on the chat itself, but on top of that, yeah, I would like to thank all the speakers for joining us in this lovely Tuesday evening. And I hope that everyone also take away a bit about the fintech space itself, and also how the underserved market is actually struggling, and how are actually fintech solutions actually alleviating a lot of their problems. Yeah, with that, does any of the speakers want to just kind of give can we have probably a round table of everyone to just give a very quick two-liner to wrap whatever they said today up? Shall we start with Terence, since yeah.
Yes, right. So first of all, great session, and I love the fact that we brought in customers to really have a real conversation here. I think fundamentally, in terms of achieving the mission of addressing the underserved, it's very apparent that it really boils down to the type of needs that exist today and how the role of fintech today could help to solve that problem. So it's not so much about what kind of features that's really sexy in place. It's really about how that really helps solve the problem in the simplest, cheapest, and fastest way. So again, going back to the type of work that we do in Instagram, fundamentally it's all around the customer needs in terms of sending money, and this is just one example that we live by. So lots of great conversation, and thank you so much, Kok Chung, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Sanjeev Agarwal.
What I want to say is the opportunity at the lower end of the pyramid is huge. The potential of any form of reaching out and serving that category, there are many areas of opportunity. The way to approach them is work at their level, understand their specific environment needs and their language, and then offer the product. Don't just import a product from an urban market and just transplant it and hope to achieve a success. It is a little longer haul, but the success and relationship is long term. That's the advantage in beauty.
Thanks so much, Sanjeev Agarwal. Sanjeev Kumar.
Thanks, Coach. This has been great. Good to be here. Good to be part of this conversation. I feel the rural India is the next big opportunity, which everybody is seeing. And one of the big players, one of the big drivers for this opportunity is how we leverage technology along with the youth of rural India. And when you combine that with understanding that customer and building trust and a community-centric approach is what is going to exploit this opportunity. So I think I personally am very excited about this opportunity. It's going to take time. It's got a lot. It's not going to be easy. There's also going to be behavioral challenges that's going to come on the way. Adoption is going to be a very, very big blocker that's going to come. But the opportunity ahead is huge. I think there is a lot of gratification in this work that we are doing.
Totally agree with you, Sanjeev Kumar. Thanks so much. Sohini?
Thank you, Kok Chung. Firstly, thank you for being a great host. And, the best part was listening to the people who are facing the issues themselves. And for me personally, it's brought up two things. There is a lot of work that each one of us here, our companies, we've done a lot, we've come very far, but it's both exciting and humbling about the kind of new problems that will keep emerging and the problems that need to be resolved. I'd just say one other thing is we need to be focused on the customer and not on the technology. If we are just obsessed with creating, because it's not a technology looking for a problem to solve. There is a problem with the customers or this customer segment that we're trying to serve, and we need to solve for that. So if the solution, I'm just saying, if the solution is the easiest way to bring cash to that person, then let's not try to force a digital wallet on that person because we believe that it needs to go digital. I think just keeping the customer at the center of innovation is going to go a really long way in trying to solve, particularly as we are trying to all address solving problems through technology for the underserved.
Thanks so much, Sohini. And of course, saving the best for the last. Scott, are you still here?
Oh, I think it's all been said. I really appreciate. Thank you so much for hosting this panel. I think it was a great panel. These are, I mean, I love to hear the entrepreneurs and operators talk. It's great that you brought on like real customers and hearing. I think the theme, as was just said, is that there's still a lot of problems to be solved, and there's a lot of opportunities to be taken. So we're still in early days. It seems like we've done a lot, and I think there's a lot to be excited that's been accomplished. But there's still so much opportunity, and there's a lot of customers out there to reach with even basic products. So you have to be optimistic about everything.
Great, thanks so much. One last thanks to all the panelists, and thanks to the audience itself. On behalf of NAV, also thanks to EY and GFF for also having us. And yeah, really, you guys have been a very amazing panel, and I really learned a lot as well. Over back to you, Vivek.
Thank you so much, Chung. Thank you for hosting this amazing session. I would like to thank the other panelists for sharing your valuable insights on this topic. I would also like to thank the engaging audience for their questions. Finally, the session has come to an end, a marathon one, quite an insightful one for everybody, I'm sure. I would like to thank with this our partners Razorpay, Amazon Pay, WhatsApp, in association with Google Pay, Open Financial Technologies, and cash-free payments. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful day and evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.